In this world, there exist figures known as shadow heroes. They are said to appear amidst chaos and battle, leaving countless achievements in their wake. On a desolate road littered with the bodies of soldiers, a young woman in a fine dress finds herself cornered by grotesque, wolf-like beasts, her face a mask of pure terror. She knows that the only identifying marks of these heroes are their black attire and the masks they wear. As if summoned by her thoughts, a dark-clad figure appears in a flash of movement, slicing through one of the monsters with lethal precision. The masked man addresses the remaining beasts, his voice calm but firm. He declares that their feast is over. With that, he leaps into the fray, a blur of black against the dark woods, as the terrified young woman can only watch. He stands over the bodies of fallen soldiers, remarking on what a nasty business it was. Turning his attention to the kneeling woman, he comments that helping a layperson would have been faster than assisting a nun like her. She looks down at a discarded helmet near her, whispering his title in awe, the Shadow Hero. The wreckage of a carriage lies overturned nearby, a testament to the violence that just occurred. The realization that she is safe finally sinks in. Overwhelmed, she breaks down, sobbing with relief amidst the carnage. Through her tears, she manages to voice her gratitude, thanking the Shadow Hero for saving her life. His purpose is clear. As the Shadow Hero, he saves people day after day, leaving no trace of his deeds behind. He is a silent guardian, watching over the world from the shadows. He disposes of a monster's corpse into a swirling vortex of darkness, reaffirming that his true identity must never be revealed. Yet, at that very moment in the city below, newspapers are being distributed with a shocking headline. The true identity of the Shadow Hero has finally been discovered. The hero, now unmasked and revealed to be a young man with dark, messy hair, screams in absolute horror. Clutching the newspaper extra from the Ratsiak Kingdom, he panics, yelling that his secret life as the Shadow Hero has been exposed to the world. His panic continued to spiral. Identified as Phil Sailmabart, the Earl's son-in-law, he screamed in raw terror, begging the unseen crowds to stop, to leave him be. A calm voice cut through his distress. It belonged to a young woman with reddish-brown hair tied back in a ribbon, dressed in a maid's uniform. This was Kalua Scarlet, Phil's personal maid, and she looked thoroughly unimpressed, sighing as she asked just how many times he intended to scream that day. She approached him as he scrubbed his face with a cloth, reminding him this was his third such outburst. If he kept shouting like that, she warned, it would be obvious to everyone. Through his tears, he promised to be a good boy and stop crying, to which she dryly asked if he was done wiping his face yet. He looked up at her, pleading for some sympathy and questioning why this had to happen. Kalua, however, remained pragmatic, asking him how this situation had come about in the first place. Phil insisted there was a deep reason for it all, though his expression lacked conviction. Before he could elaborate, another young man with styled hair and fine clothes approached Kalua. Having heard that the Shadow Hero had revealed his face, he found the entire affair amusing and requested that she entertain him with the story. At this, Phil began his tale. He explained that the previous day, he had saved someone, just as he always did, intending to leave without a trace. Kalua confirmed that this was his noble creed. He continued, explaining that the person he rescued was a very cute girl who insisted on thanking him properly, grabbing his arm and refusing to let him leave. Caught up in the excitement, he had let her lead him to a tavern. There, surrounded by her and her friends, they began asking for tales of his heroic deeds. The celebration quickly got out of hand. He became thoroughly drunk, basking in the attention as the crowd cheered for Phil Sailmabart, the Shadow Hero. He confessed to Kalua that he vaguely remembered blurting things out. The memory caused him to collapse to his knees in the present, overcome with nausea and regret as Kalua noted what an unpleasant reason this was. Clutching his head, Phil lamented that alcohol was a poison to his mind. Kalua looked down at him, stating that if he'd just kept his features hidden, he might have been fine. But since he was in his black costume, all it took was him blurting out his interesting name to give everything away. He questions why his reputation is so poor, wondering why everyone is so quick to suspect the worst of him. He laments that he's seen as nothing more than the degenerate son of an earl, a man who frequents brothels and shirks his responsibilities, an image reinforced by the public scorn. She raises a finger, a thought striking her. She points out the foolishness of his actions, questioning why someone with such a poor public image, someone disliked by the citizens, would ever think it wise to declare himself the Shadow Hero. She deems it a grave miscalculation. The very costume in question hangs brazenly on a clothesline outside, mask and all, left to dry since the previous day. As a passerby points it out in recognition, Phil cries out in alarm, realizing his blunder. She observes him, still clad in the hero's garb. Noting that he was so covered in vomit, it was clear he drank himself ill. She dismisses it as a pathetic excuse and bluntly asks what he intends to do now after such a foolish mistake. She continues with a faint, almost mocking smile, admitting she never expected such a chaotic outcome. Still, she reasons, what's done is done. He revealed his secret while being sick, and it can't be taken back. She finishes with a sharp declaration. A hero should not be so pathetic. He retorts from the floor, his voice filled with desperation. He insists she must understand. He simply wants to enjoy the freedom he has been denied for so long. She scoffs at his idea of freedom, envisioning him spending all his time at brothels. She points out that even with his identity known, he'll simply be a pawn in a political marriage. Her cynical vision culminates in an image of him being treated like a beast of burden by a powerful woman. He vehemently denies that this is the future he desires. He slumps over a table, utterly defeated. Kaluuya sighs in exasperation. She tells him that if he despises the situation so much, he should simply stay home and stop helping others. She reminds him of his confident demeanor the day before, when he proudly took on a name, contrasting it with his current desire to simply disappear. He looks up sharply, calling her suggestion foolish. He insists that he could never abandon a woman in distress. As she meets his gaze, he quickly looks away, dismissing his own heartfelt declaration as nothing. He finally clarifies his true desire. He never wanted fame. He simply wished to live a dignified life, free from ruin, and to avoid becoming a mere pawn in the manipulative games of the aristocracy. He stretches languidly, declaring he has no particular desire to involve himself with the royal family, though he acknowledges that a letter has arrived from them. His reluctance is understandable, as a massive crowd has gathered outside the mansion, cheering and holding signs. Amidst the clamor, a voice suggests he read the letter during breakfast, but Phil screams in protest against the entire situation. Now seated at the breakfast table, he offers a quiet thanks for the meal. Kaluuya, standing nearby, notes that his identity is now public knowledge, which likely explains his haggard appearance, and asks if he has read the letter. His attention, however, is fixed on the window, wondering aloud if the commoners should be dispersed. He muses that things have certainly changed, but Kaluuya bluntly informs him it's no use now that he's been revealed as the shadow hero. Outside, the crowd's excitement is palpable. They've come to see him off on his supposed journey to the royal castle. The very idea horrifies Phil, who vehemently denies any intention of going. His denial turns into a desperate wail as he clutches his head. As Kaluuya watches him, a sudden, heavy tremor runs through the building, catching Phil's attention. The source of the disturbance reveals itself. A stout young man, flanked by a retinue of maids, stands imperiously in the doorway. This is Zon Selmabard, Phil's younger brother. He loudly proclaims that the room smells of refuse and demands to know if his older brother is present. Phil acknowledges his brother's arrival. Zon retorts with a sneer, comparing the sound of the crowd outside to the squealing of pigs, and remarking that it must mean his brother is indeed present. He wastes no time in accusing Phil, demanding to know what he, a man who supposedly does nothing but lays about, could have possibly done to cause such a ruckus. His voice drips with contempt as he mockingly questions if this same layabout brother could truly be the famed shadow hero. Phil calmly asks if his brother is suggesting the public outcry is some kind of fabrication. Zon confirms without hesitation, shouting that it is. His brother's tirade intensifies as he points an accusing finger. He scoffs at the notion, declaring that Phil possesses no talent, is incapable of work, and lacks any martial blessing, demanding to know how such a person could possibly be considered a hero. He vehemently denies the accusation, shouting that he is not the shadow hero. Behind him, Kaluuya watches, her expression one of clear annoyance at his outburst. His brother, Zon, ignores the denial and turns his fury towards Kaluuya. He points a finger at her, demanding she stop being so familiar with him and come to his side instead. He continues his tirade, berating her for her insolence. He reminds her of her place, questioning how a mere maid dares to speak to him in such a manner. In response, Kaluuya's demeanor shifts from passive to resolute. She firmly grips Zon's arm, informing him that she has already chosen her master. She reminds him that she is, after all, a guest, a fact he seems to have forgotten. Before Zon can react to her words, she effortlessly heaves him over her shoulder, sending him flying through the air with a powerful throw. Phil can only watch in stunned silence. The young noble crashes to the floor with a heavy thud, knocked unconscious. As Kaluuya stands over his prone form, the other maids in the hall gasp in unison, their faces a mask of shock and disbelief. Unfazed by the audience, she delivers a sharp kick to the unconscious Zon's side. She then turns to Phil, suggesting that since Zon is clearly unwell, she should take him away. With that, she begins to drag the limp body of Zon down the corridor, casually apologizing for the disturbance. As she departs, she informs Phil to prepare himself, as a guest will be arriving in the afternoon specifically to meet with him. Later, as a grand carriage pulls up to the front of the estate, Kaluuya reveals the identity of the esteemed visitor. Phil looks on, his expression hardening as she announces the arrival of the saintess. In this world, a figure known as the saint is revered. She is a vessel for the goddess's miracle, a beacon of hope who protects the populace from disaster and the demon lord's encroaching miasma. In the shadow of this divine protection stands Phil Selmabard, a young man whose support for the saint is absolute, yet who wields a power he has yet to fully grasp. One such saint, a young woman named Miris Maria of the Eris Church, arrives unexpectedly. With a gentle smile, she introduces herself and apologizes for the sudden visit. She is greeted by Phil, who notes that there are currently 4 saints, and she is one of them. He welcomes her, remarking that since he is not a member of the Eris Church, she is a most unusual and honored guest. He leads her into a parlor. As they sit, with his maid Kaluuya serving refreshments, he politely asks the saint what business has brought her to his home. He feels a faint sense of familiarity, wondering where he might have seen her before. Before he can ponder it further, Merciless leans in close. Her face inches from his and declares how much she wanted to meet him. Phil is visibly startled by her forwardness, realizing that the influence she exudes is far more potent than that of any noble he has ever encountered. His expression hardens as she looks at him with knowing eyes. She addresses him not by his noble name, but by his secret title. You are the shadow hero, are you not? As he remains silent, she explains that she has come to thank him. She clarifies that the hero who saved her was not some common thug, and that a misjudgment on her part would have caused great trouble for her parents. Kalua observes the exchange with a look of disdain. Kalua then whispers to Phil, suggesting that if Merciless truly wants to show gratitude, a strip show would be a win-win situation. Phil ignores the crude remark, his mind on a different path. He believes true gratitude is giving the other person what they truly desire, and his own desire is to find his true enemy. An idea suddenly sparks within him. His entire demeanor shifts as a bright, almost manic smile spreads across his face. He turns back to the saint and asks with feigned shock, I'm the shadow hero? He continues the act with theatrical flair, telling the bewildered saint that she must have heard a rumor. He insists she call him by his first name and eagerly asks her to listen to his own rumors, leaving Merciless completely stunned by his bizarre performance. His bizarre performance was met with unexpected delight from a saint. Merciless clasped her hands together, her eyes wide with excitement, and confirmed that she had heard the rumors about him being a perverted kappa. Since he wasn't denying it, she cheerfully concluded it must be true. She leaned forward, her conviction unwavering, adding that for him to be aware of such things must mean he had some special reason for his actions. Her intensity left Phil sweating and speechless. His maid, Kalua, grabbed him from behind, whispering that this saint was a formidable person and questioning if he even remembered having saved her. She continued her warning under her breath, noting that his recent public confession was so strange that it might one day be recorded in the church's dark history. Sometime later, having composed himself and changed into formal attire, Phil sat opposite Merciless. He addressed her politely, stating that while he was rumored to be the shadow hero, this was a misunderstanding. He claimed to be nothing more than a devoted fan, explaining that his public persona was merely an elaborate costume. He then asked her if he truly resembled the hero, suggesting that since she was saved by the real one, she should know the difference. Merciless looked at him thoughtfully before replying with a simple, "You do look alike," leaving him momentarily stunned. Forcing a smile, he pressed her for specifics, asking exactly which part of him was similar. With unwavering cheerfulness, she replied that their build was a match. His smile strained further as he mumbled about his height being average, but she continued, adding that their voices were also alike. Losing his composure, he lunged forward, his face inches from hers, intensely arguing that a voice could be faked and that even their scent was the same. Her eyes widened in shock as she wondered aloud if he was some new type of stalker. Before he could continue, Kalua seized him from behind, pinning his arms and pleading for him to calm down. But it was too late. A look of absolute certainty crossed Merciless's face. She declared that she knew it the moment they met. Phil Selmabart was, without a doubt, the shadow hero. The realization of his complete failure washed over Phil, leaving him limp in Kalua's grasp. He looks up at St. Merciless, explaining that he came all this way simply to thank her for what happened before. She blushes, flustered by his presence. She insists there's no need for thanks, admitting that she's getting nervous. Phil, however, looks on with a perplexed expression, not understanding her reaction. Internally, he curses his situation, realizing that if it weren't for the rumors about the shadow hero, she would have taken his gratitude seriously. He recognizes this charm as part of the saint's power. Just then, the sound of shattering glass echoes through the room as a window breaks. In response to the sound, both Phil and his maid, Kalua, turn in alarm. Two assassins clad in black leap through the shattered window, brandishing daggers as they lunge into the room. The attack is immediate. One assassin hurls a projectile at Kalua, who deftly blocks it with a serving tray. As the other assailant rushes towards the saint, Phil reacts without hesitation, kicking a heavy table over to block the attacker's path. The assassins land atop the overturned table, but one is brought up short. He looks down in surprise to see his hand enveloped by a swirling mass of dark fabric that has appeared from nowhere. From that darkness, the shadow hero emerges, his cloak having ensnared the assassin's wrist. The second attacker stares in disbelief as the hero lifts a small end table, preparing to strike. He brings the table down with crushing force onto the captured assassin's head, shouting a sharp, "Hey!" to draw the man's focus. Looming over his stunned opponent, the shadow hero's eyes glint menacingly. He states that there are 18 attackers in total, and that this one is in the way. Placing a hand on the assassin's head, he invokes a technique, binding magic. A violent eruption of dark power bursts from the point of contact, brutally incapacitating the assassin in a spray of black energy and blood. He stood alone amidst the aftermath, the dark residue of his power clinging to the ruined furniture. His hooded cloak and mask were gone, leaving only Phil Selmabart in a room filled with silence and destruction. From the doorway, St. Merciless could only stare, her voice catching in her throat. The newly arrived royal guards had secured the area, forming a protective circle around her and Kalua. their swords drawn against a threat that had already vanished. His back remained turned to them all. Phil gazed out through the shattered remains of the grand window, the morning light glinting off the countless shards of broken glass. As he stood there, a young nobleman with reddish-brown hair approached him, his voice low but clear. He stated what everyone was now thinking, that Phil was indeed the shadow hero. The direct accusation struck him, and a cold sweat beaded on his brow. His carefully guarded secret was exposed. Elsewhere, in a chamber shrouded in darkness, a hooded figure received grim news. The report of failure was met with disbelief and anger. Far away, the spires of a grand, Gothic cathedral pierced the night sky, a silent testament to a hidden power. Within those walls, a woman in a nun's habit considered the news. A faint, knowing smile played on her lips as she mused on the name that was now on everyone's tongue, the shadow hero. In the world of magic, there is an indispensable component, a concept known as an engraved name. This name is used when a mage activates their power, incorporating their ideal into a magical formula. Phil Selmabard awakens with a start, finding himself bound tightly to a bed in an unfamiliar, opulent room. He groans, realizing just how restricted his movement is. He hears the door open and Calua Scarlet enters, greeting him cheerfully. Still tied down, Phil looks up in confusion, his mind racing. He wonders where he is and if he's been caught up in some major incident or perhaps some bizarre roleplay. Calua simply says, "Good morning," adding that while the mystery was fun, there are things that must be done. Phil demands to know what she means. She ignores his question, instead asking about his plans for the day and suggesting they head to the dining hall for breakfast. Exasperated, Phil shouts, demanding to know why he is tied up. His thoughts drift to the previous night's chaos. He had been forced to use his magic in front of the saint to protect her from assassins, and as a result, he was now staying in her residence. Meanwhile, Miri's Maria addresses her council, excitedly confirming that her savior was none other than the shadow hero. The men are skeptical, with one retorting that the shadow hero is widely known as incompetent and a good-for-nothing. When asked why she is so sure, Miri's admits she doesn't know his name, but insists he is a wonderful person. She recalls her time with him, remembering the profound kindness she felt in his presence. With a gentle and certain smile, she reaffirms her belief in his character. Back in the bedroom, Phil suddenly lets out a shuddering sneeze, a look of sheer bliss on his face. Calua observes him coolly, identifying his reaction as a fetish and remarking on how creepy it is. He lay bound to the bed as Calua sat beside him, offering a strange sort of reassurance. She explained that his identity was secure as long as he remained with Lady Miri's, then casually asked for his thoughts on the previous day's attack. She answered her own question, declaring the situation to be the absolute worst. From a grand hall filled with clergy, she began to elaborate on the church's political turmoil. The previous pope had passed away without a successor, and now 2 archbishops were vying for the vacant seat. One of these archbishops, a portly man with a gentle smile, explained the situation to Miri's and her attendants. He described his rival as an experienced, elderly man, while the other candidate's identity remained a mystery, though rumors suggested it was a young girl. The conflict between the 2 archbishops had resulted in a complete stalemate. As symbolized by a perfectly balanced scale, the number of believers and supporters for the saint were evenly matched against the opposing faction, creating a tense deadlock. Returning to the conversation, Calua revealed a crucial development. The shadow hero had officially declared his allegiance to their faction. Miri's beamed, surmising that the archbishop had leveraged her gratitude to secure this alliance. Phil, however, looked on with irritation, realizing he was being used as a political pawn and that Miri's seemed to only care about the result, not the bloody work involved. The attack from the previous day was merely a feint, a calculated move by an opposing faction. Their true objective is to shatter the influence of the saint, Miri's Maria. If she falls, the balance of power will shift dramatically in their favor, as she is their clear target. Meanwhile, Phil Selmabart finds himself in a less-than dignified position, tightly bound with rope. He groans in frustration, lamenting how he's been dragged into this situation and noting that the assailants either took their own lives with poison or were swiftly eliminated. He concludes that his only path forward is to find the saint and get some answers directly from her. With his mind made up, he turns his attention to his captor, Calua. Now that their discussion seems to be over, he asks if she would please untie the ropes. She responds not by loosening the ropes, but by giving them a sharp tug, making him wince. She remarks with amusement that at this rate, he's going to time-slip back to his younger years. She leans in, a playful smirk on her face, and reminisces about how cute he used to be. She playfully demands that he show her that adorable side of himself, just one more time, much to his bewilderment. He thrashes against the ropes, shouting that he has reached his limit and this embarrassing moment will stain the bedsheets forever. Calua calmly tells him his struggles are futile. Their exchange is abruptly interrupted as the bedroom door swings open. Miri's enters with a bright smile, wishing Phil a good morning and sincerely thanking him for his help the previous day. Her cheerful demeanor falters as she takes in the sight before her. Phil, completely bound on the bed, with Calua holding the end of the rope. After Miri's quietly departs, Calua leans close to the still-bound Phil. She confesses that she rather enjoys being the kind of maid who would so thoroughly degrade her master's dignity. Later, he sits at a desk, looking utterly drained as he reflects on the string of misfortunes that have befallen him since the previous day. While the misunderstanding with Merciless was eventually resolved, he can't help but ponder just whose fault the entire embarrassing incident was to begin with. He turned his attention to his duties, reviewing a report. The state of public order was deteriorating, and he found himself questioning what the guards were even doing. His maid, Kalua, approached from behind, offering her own assessment. She pointed out that they lacked the manpower and funds, suggesting the troublemakers were merely rebellious youths. She mused that if their finances improved, people would flock to their territory, a thought she found strange. He let out a weary sigh, deciding on a straightforward solution. To deal with the troublemakers, he would simply increase the number of guards. In response, Kalua informed him that there was still budget available for recruitment. Holding out a small sweet, she gently chided him, saying that sighing would let his happiness escape, and offered him the treat. He accepted the sweet, his thoughts drifting back to the poor state of public order. A different concern surfaced. He realized that if he wasn't careful, Kalua could become a rival. Despite this, he accepted another piece. As he ate, the saint, Merciless, entered the room. She stopped short, seeing him with his mouth open, and asked what on earth he was doing. She quickly explained her presence, insisting that she wanted to thank him personally. From the side, Kalua noted that she had already passed the message along that morning, but Merciless's enthusiasm was not dampened. The saint elaborated, her expression earnest. She recounted how he had helped her on 2 separate occasions, and now that she was scheduled for an extended stay, she felt it would be wrong not to express her gratitude properly. Therefore, she continued, she had decided to do something that would please him. She would serve him. The declaration left him stunned, while Merciless felt her own heart pound from the special effort she was making. She then held up a small bunch of grapes, her gaze fixed on him with a gentle and determined expression, ready to begin her service. Her forwardness caught Phil completely off guard. He pinched his own cheek, a strange thought crossing his mind. So, this is what it feels like to have a younger sister. His brief moment of contemplation was shattered by a sudden commotion. Merciless, now pinching Kalua's cheek, scolded the maid for not being more affectionate and doting. As Kalua cried out in protest, Phil tried to de-escalate the situation, telling Merciless not to be so angry and assuring her that this was all part of the plan, a statement that only raised more questions. Leaning in close to the still confused saint, Phil revealed the next step of his strategy. He explained that he and Merciless would become close, and then he would have her spread a rumor that Phil Selmabart is not the shadow hero. In a grand library, Kalua Scarlet confronts Phil Selmabart, questioning the unannounced arrival of the saint, Merciless Maria. Kalua finds the situation highly suspicious, pointing out that Phil, as the shadow hero, seems completely oblivious to their guest's presence. Startled, Phil looks up from his book, wondering if he is truly that unnoticeable, while Merciless watches the exchange with a puzzled expression. She presses on, adding that, furthermore, someone has been spreading rumors about him throughout the city. The news causes Phil's expression to darken as he looks down in thought. As they speak, Merciless sits quietly in her armchair, her gaze distant and unfocused. The rumors were indeed true. In the city square, Merciless preaches the heiress teachings to a large crowd, proclaiming that with the shadow hero nearby, everyone is safe. This use of his name to gather followers causes Phil to recoil in dismay, realizing it's impossible to reason with her. Returning to the present moment, Merciless looks at him with wide, innocent eyes. She asks hesitantly if he was truly unaware of his own identity as the shadow hero. Her shoulders slump as she looks down at her hands, wondering aloud if her actions have caused him trouble. He turns away with a sigh, reassuring her not to worry. He acknowledges that he can see she has no malicious intent and that he doesn't blame her. Her expression brightens instantly. Looking up at him with a gentle smile, she thanks him, remarking on his kindness. The quiet moment is interrupted by Kalua, who approaches holding a letter with a prominent seal. She remarks that Phil shouldn't get too comfortable, presenting the letter from the royal family and demanding to know his intentions. As Merciless expresses her surprise at the letter from the castle, Kalua explains it arrived the previous day. Phil, however, has a single, decisive thought. He will ignore it completely. He gazes upon the imposing royal palace, contemplating the summons. While ignoring the royal family is one thing, a direct order to appear at the castle is another matter entirely. He scoffs internally at the thought of becoming a political tool, deeming it a complete waste of his time. He turns to Merciless, using her reception as a convenient excuse. He claims to be too busy to attend, but she protests, reminding him of the importance of a royal request. He simply smiles, dismissing her concerns by insisting that her company is far more important to him at the moment. His declaration strikes her with unexpected force, leaving her utterly speechless as a deep blush spreads across her face. Meanwhile, outside, a crowd has gathered, their voices rising in a unified chant for the shadow hero to appear. Watching from a balcony, Kalua sighs in exasperation, muttering about another girl falling for his act. Having since donned his disguise inside, he quietly informs Kalua of urgent news. The Amethysta nobles are reportedly under attack. The information startles her. With a simple, "Well then, I'm off," he prepares to depart, earning a concerned, silent gaze from Kalua. She immediately questions his haste, reminding him of the danger should his identity as the shadow hero be exposed. She insists there's no need for him to risk it, but he counters firmly, stating that he cannot simply overlook the misfortune of others. He places a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Kaluuya looks down for a moment before meeting his gaze again, quietly remarking that his reasoning is foolish. He elaborates, explaining that he was once saved by another's kindness. He considers his current actions a legacy, a parting gift left to him by that very person. After another successful intervention, the masked figure known as the Shadow Hero adopts a false name to deflect the growing rumors. Standing amongst the crowd, he overhears them speculating that the hero might be Phil Salmabard, only to dismiss the idea. To further the misdirection, he introduces himself to an onlooker as Eris Man. Kaluuya Scarlet approaches him, remarking with amusement that it's a nice sentiment. However, she quickly dismisses his attempt at an alias as impossible and instructs him to follow her back to the mansion. The Shadow Hero simply scoffs in response. She tells him she will handle the rest and wishes him a safe journey. With a brief acknowledgement, he dissolves into a swirling pool of shadow on the floor, vanishing completely. Kaluuya watches, slightly startled, as the last wisp of darkness fades away. He reappears on a rocky cliff at night, overlooking the forested territory of Amajasuda. A man with white hair and a black mask covering his mouth awaits him. The man thanks the Shadow Hero for coming, but the hero replies that he is not fond of being praised. The masked man kneels, stating that he cannot be saved by the Shadow Hero. He then humbly asks for permission to approach. The hero looks down on him, questioning why he should help someone being pursued by their former shadow comrades. The man clarifies that it is his masters who are currently under attack by bandits. When the hero asks what that has to do with him, the man simply says it's fine if he chooses not to help. Despite his words, he leaps from the cliff, declaring that he's off to save people again today. Below, bandits close in on a carriage as its guards shout at them to stay back. The carriage guards are locked in a desperate struggle, their swords clashing against the bandits' blades as they roar orders to protect the lady inside. From within the carriage, Miri's Maria emerges, proclaiming that she will fight as well. A guard frantically orders her back inside, warning of the danger. At that moment, a large, masked bandit leader appears, announcing that he has come for the lady's life. The bandit leader roars for her to die, bringing his massive sword down upon her. Miri's flinches, squeezing her eyes shut in terror as she cries out for someone, anyone, to help. Just as the bandit leader's weapon was about to fall, she watched as a dark figure descended from the sky. With a thunderous impact, the newcomer crushed the bandit's head underfoot, saving her in the nick of time. He looked down at the fallen man with contempt, rebuking the scoundrel for taking such pleasure in attempting to kill a young woman. She could only stare up at her mysterious savior, her eyes wide with disbelief. Her savior turned to face her, stating that questions could wait, as this was hardly the time for pleasantries. As she took in his plain mask and black attire, a realization struck her. She whispered the name aloud, questioning if he was truly the legendary Shadow Hero. Ignoring her question, he addressed the entire battlefield. He declared that he would not permit anyone the freedom to betray or harm another. For those who would restrict the happiness of others, he would impose a fitting binding of his own. Raising a hand, he conjured a glowing ring of light and thrust it toward the heavens, proclaiming his intent to bind the world. With a single gesture, the Shadow Hero unleashes a massive wave of roiling darkness. The ground erupts, throwing bandits and guards alike into chaos as they cry out in terror and confusion, the dark tide rising to consume them. The shadow swells into a monstrous tsunami, a great, dark sea that surges forward, poised to swallow the carriage and all who stand in its path. Under the light of the full moon, the shadow sea crashes down, its dark power completely overwhelming the battlefield and silencing the conflict. When the chaos subsides, a profound quiet falls over the landscape. The carriage now rests safely under a tranquil, star-filled sky. The Shadow Hero moves through the aftermath, checking on the last of the fallen bandits. The noblewoman he rescued approaches him as one of her guards offers an apology, which the hero quickly dismisses, telling him not to worry. She formally introduces herself as Alicia Amexista, daughter of the Amexista Count, and thanks him for saving them. He looks away, stating that he didn't do it for their gratitude. His demeanor shifts abruptly. He declares that he has no name, but if they must call him something, they should listen well. With sudden intensity, he points to his own face and shouts, "Fi." His declaration hangs in the night air, leaving Alicia and her guards staring in stunned silence. She hesitantly repeats the name, Fi. He confirms that this is his real name, warning her that an imposter has been using the title Shadow Hero lately. He insists that they remember his true name and leave. He then strikes a dramatic pose, sitting down with a flourish. He urges them to depart quickly, jesting that there might be an encore from the audience. The guards and Alicia can only stare, bewildered, as one guard meekly agrees. He departed, a lone silhouette walking down a snow-covered road under a star-filled sky. From her window, Alicia Amexista watched him disappear, his voice still lingering in her mind. Elsewhere, in a luxurious bathing chamber, Kaluuya Scarlet and the Saint, Miri's Maria, soaked in an ornate tub. Kaluuya commented on how wonderful the bath was, but Miri seemed lost in thought, remarking that the Shadow Hero she'd heard about was different from the person she met. She then explained to a startled Kaluuya that she only wanted to talk for a little while, hoping to pass the time until Phil's return. Flustered by the saint's familiar tone, Kaluuya replied that it was a great honor. Kaluuya, blushing in the warm water, confessed her admiration, telling Merciless she seems so mature and that she finds it enviable. At the saint's confused expression, Kaluuya clarified her desire to become a mature woman just like her. Her eyes then fell, comparing her own physique to Merciless's with a hint of disappointment. Her cheerful demeanor faded, replaced by a quiet melancholy. Looking down at her hands submerged in the water, Merciless confessed that she, too, wishes to become a mature woman, just like her older sister, Quirce. The revelation surprised Kaluuya. Another young girl in the bath interjected, pointing out that simply calling someone sister doesn't make it true. Merciless smiled gently, clarifying that she was speaking of the person who is always looking after her. In a sunlit hall, the saint, Merciless sits with a gentle smile, remarking to herself a young girl named Quirce is becoming quite mature, much like Kaluuya. Elsewhere, in a warm bath, the young girl in question splashes excitedly, declaring to Kaluuya that her goal is to become a grown-up woman like her older sister. To achieve this, she proclaims she will eat plenty of food. Her cheerful declaration earns a quiet laugh from Kaluuya, who finds the girl's earnestness endearing. The girl responds with a bright yes, as Kaluuya apologizes for being lost in thought. The scene shifts violently to a dark forest, where the captured bandit leader gasps as his head is forced back, his defeat absolute. Standing over the pile of unconscious bandits, the shadow hero considers his next move, deciding to deal with them before they awaken. His thoughts are cut short by the sound of a footstep, and he whirls around, alerted to a new presence. A young woman with blonde hair, clad in a nun's habit, stands there with a massive war hammer resting on her shoulder. With a playful smile, she asks if the fight is already over. The shadow hero addresses her cautiously, warning that it's dangerous for a young lady to be out alone at night. She lets out a cheerful laugh, undeterred by his warning. Instead, she playfully asks if this means he will escort her home safely. He studies her attire, recognizing the nun's habit. It is the same style worn by Merciless, leading him to conclude that she must be a genuine member of the clergy. She continues speaking, mentioning that she heard some ruffians were causing trouble and that the guests were pleased with the outcome. She then addresses him directly, stating that he helped people again today, the shadow hero. He begins to deny it, but she cuts him off, her playful demeanor vanishing as she looks him in the eyes and speaks his true name with unnerving certainty. Phil Salmabart. He attempts to deflect, introducing himself by the alias Phi. Brushing off her knowledge of his true name, he suggests they leave it at that and cheekily offers to escort her on what he calls a moonlit day. The warrior nun seems to consider his offer, asking if he will join her again on their next night out. He readily agrees, though she observes that he seems to be a man with many secrets. He laughs, dismissing her observation. He insists he is just an ordinary person and finds it odd that a girl who looks so much like the saint would be in his company. She agrees to postpone their date, stating she has no further business with him for the day. The masked hero is left to wonder just how much this mysterious woman truly knows about it. Without warning, she swings her massive war hammer down upon the bound bandits, obliterating them in a brutal, explosive strike. The shadow hero freezes, his eyes widening in disbelief at the sheer violence of the act. Wiping a bit of sweat from her brow, the warrior nun casually declares that the villains for the day have been successfully taken care of. As the shadow hero looks on, a young girl runs into the clearing, cheerfully announcing that her big sister's work is finished. She tells the nun that a bath and snacks are waiting for her when she returns. The warrior nun's attention snaps back to the shadow hero, her expression hardening. She asks him directly if he was aware that villains must be dispatched with absolute mercilessness. Phil Salmabart sits alone, looking out over a vast, cheering crowd. A banner celebrating the shadow hero is visible among them. He quietly notes to himself that someone has yet to leave. His thoughts drift to his recent troubles. His workload has increased, the security situation has worsened, and his brother, Zahn, has been relentlessly pursuing Miri's Maria. Zahn attempts to claim Miri's as his woman, but she coldly rebuffs him, stating she has no intention of being brought down to his level and telling him to stop speaking to her. His mind also wanders to another recent event, the encounter with the mysterious warrior nun from the other day. He wonders who, or what, she truly was. His contemplation is shattered as his maid, Kaluuya Scarlet, bursts into the room, announcing that a guest has arrived. Startled, Phil demands to know who would visit at such a time, complaining that his troubles are mounting. With a serious expression, Kaluuya reveals the visitor's identity, the princess. The title evokes the history of the Lyrak kingdom, a nation known for its 3 princesses, depicted here in an illustration alongside their father, the king. This historical account continues, explaining that the 3 princesses were educated from a young age specifically to support the crown prince. One became skilled in martial arts, while another excelled in intellect, becoming a great princess. The thought of this great princess, renowned for her intellect, causes Phil's imagination to run wild, and he begins to drool with anticipation. The guest who has arrived is indeed royalty, Nicola Lyrak, the 2nd princess of the Lyrak kingdom. She apologizes for the wait, but Phil is too stunned to respond. She graciously tells him not to worry, as she understands he must be busy. As Phil processes the situation, a brief, intense memory of his maid's capabilities flashes through his mind. In a boxing ring, Kaluuya leans over a battered opponent, warning him that a beautiful woman's jab is harsh. She advises that a straight punch might come next, and he should try his best not to be knocked out. Back in the present, the tense meeting is interrupted by another arrival. Miri's Maria approaches Princess Nicola, directly asking if she is the rumored wicked woman. Without waiting for an answer, she introduces herself as the saint. Behind her, Phil wonders how she gathered such information. Ignoring the saint's accusation for a moment, Princess Nicola's gaze settles upon the maid. She remarks that it has been a while, addressing Kalua directly. Kalua, with a neutral expression, quietly agrees. She continues, stating that she had heard rumors Kalua was working as a maid and asks if it is truly the case. The princess adds that not just she, but the entire social world has been buzzing with talk of Kalua's disappearance. As Kalua remains silent, Miri's remarks that the situation is quite interesting and suggests they discuss it in detail over tea sometime. Kalua internally reflects on the oddity of the situation, acknowledging that it would normally be unthinkable for the daughter of a ducal house to serve a mere count. After a brief, almost insincere apology from Miri's for her earlier outburst, Phil steps in to redirect the conversation. With a pleasant smile, he formally asks Princess Nicola the purpose of her visit. The princess states that her purpose is exactly as written in the letter she sent. A sharp glint appears in Phil's eyes as he confirms his understanding, his pleasant demeanor vanishing. From the side, Kalua notes with concern that he understood immediately. Leaning closer, Miri's whispers to Phil, mentioning the invitation to the Crown Prince's birthday party and asking if that is what the princess wishes to discuss. Phil confirms that he will, of course, attend as a noble of his house, prompting a simple acknowledgement from Saint. He sits back, a faint smile playing on his lips. Internally, he admits that being celebrated as the shadow hero is, in fact, a pleasure. Princess Nicola then speaks plainly, fanning herself as she mentions how envious she is that her brother speaks so highly of the shadow hero. She declares that their entire conversation is proceeding under the assumption that he is the one they seek. Sensing the trap, Kalua leans in to whisper a warning. She explains that the princess's true purpose is to confirm his identity. If things continue, his status as a shadow hero will be cemented, and he will be forced to return. His expression hardens at the realization. He understands that if the Crown Prince learns of this, he will undoubtedly be used as a political workhorse. He resolves that he must force them to acknowledge his identity here and now, on his own terms. He turns to Miri's, who flushes, asking in a panic if he's undressing for her. He quickly clarifies that this is part of his plan and asks her to convey to Princess Nicola that he is not the shadow hero. Princess Nicola, overhearing this, looks on in disbelief, questioning if he is truly telling a lie. His gaze intensifies as he leans in closer to Miri's, urging her to skillfully lead them on and convince them that he is not the shadow hero. Internally, he resolves that this is the moment to leverage the saint's influence, recognizing that his entire future now rests on her cooperation. The declaration hits Princess Nicola with the force of a physical blow. The idea of a lie coming from the famously pure and innocent saint is too much to process. Stunned, she can only stammer out her own name in disbelief. Beside a stoic Phil Sailmabard, Miri's Maria makes a firm declaration to Princess Nicola. With conviction, she states that Phil is absolutely not the shadow hero. He closes his eyes, internally wincing at the blatant falsehood. This denial, however, only fuels Princess Nicola's suspicion. She points out the flaws in the story. Phil didn't help her, he doesn't possess black clothes, and he doesn't use magic. Therefore, she reasons, for him to have helped the saint, he must possess the shadow hero's magic. As Miri's opens her mouth to speak again, Kalua swiftly covers it with her hand. Princess Nicola shouts at Phil to stop, warning him not to dig the hole any deeper. Kalua mutters that it was a mistake to rely on Miri's for this. Overwhelmed, Princess Nicola fans herself, admitting she got swept up in the moment but had intended to confirm his identity. In response to the pressure, Phil announces his decision. He is leaving the Sailmabard house. He instructs Kalua to prepare for his departure, declaring he will cast aside his family name. She watches him, deciding against pressing the matter further. She muses that she doesn't wish to upset her brother, so she will hold back for now. As he turns to leave, Phil reflects on the encounter. He managed to end the conversation without revealing more, but he understands that if the shadow hero is deemed an enemy of the state, he will be considered a dangerous element. He realizes with certainty that the rumors are true. Princess Nicola is a formidable strategist. The princess takes her leave, inviting Miri's to a party before departing. As Miri's thanks her, Phil stands by, thinking to himself that the confrontation, for now, is over. Once inside her carriage, however, Princess Nicola's thoughts race. She wonders why she never received a reply to her letter, recalling that she had specifically informed the Sailmabard butler of her intent to send an invitation. She concludes there must be another reason for Phil's appearance. She looks directly at Phil, a knowing smile on her face, and asks if she has ever been saved by him. The question catches him completely off guard, his eyes widening in shock. He stammers, sweat beading on his brow, insisting that he has no memory of such an event. Hiding her expression behind her fan, Princess Nicola agrees to let the matter rest for now. She then leans closer, whispering to him that this particular party seems to have an unusually high number of church officials in attendance compared to previous years. She warns him to be careful, noting the presence of influential figures who do not normally attend such events. With that, she departs, leaving Phil to ponder her words as Merciless peeks out from hiding. Several days pass. He is now in a state of pure elation, exclaiming that he must prepare now that his visit to the castle is confirmed. Merciless, relieved that the recent commotion has died down, asks if it's truly all right for him to go, and he assures her it would be a waste not to. His good mood is infectious as he notes that the number of onlookers has decreased, making him happy to proceed to the mansion. Merciless, waving her hands in confusion, asks where exactly he intends to go as they approach the ornate gates of a large estate. As they walk along the path, he explains that he thought he would show her a new place today. He dismisses the idea of staying inside the mansion, believing it would be too stifling for her. He turns to her, but she insists that she enjoys every day she spends at the mansion. Undeterred, he promises to show her an even more enjoyable place. The place he leads them to is a stone courtyard filled with the clash of steel. A formidable, heavily armored warrior spars with several other knights. Phil and Merciless stop short, taken aback by the sight, as he wonders where they have ended up. The sparring ceases as the knights notice their arrival. The large warrior lifts his visor, a wide smile breaking across his face as he warmly welcomes Merciless. She, in turn, greets all the men, while Phil stands back with his arms crossed, a look of weary resignation on his face. He addresses the knight captain, proposing that the church's knights join the training session. Phil explains that it wouldn't be an inconvenience, as their current duties mainly involve proselytizing, leaving them with ample time. The captain seems to accept this readily, acknowledging the situation. With the matter settled, the knight captain declares that the training will now begin. Phil turns his attention to Merciless, telling her that if this helps strengthen her ability to protect herself, then that is more than enough reason to offer his family's assistance. A blush spreads across Merciless's face as she looks down, touched by his words, and offers a quiet thank you. Calua Scarlet stands with quiet intensity, her fists clenched as she observes a squad of knights training. Nearby, Merciless asks Phil if Calua is also participating in the training for her own protection. Phil confirms her participation, but clarifies that she is present to provide instruction, much to Merciless's surprise. He continues with a faint smile, explaining that what he truly wants to show them is a demonstration of anti-mage training. As the exercise commences, the knights surround Calua. In a blink, she vanishes from their midst, leaving the soldiers bewildered. Merciless gasps, wondering aloud if she simply disappeared. She reappears as a blur of fluid motion, weaving through the knights and striking them down with precise, devastating blows. Her movements are too fast to track as she incapacitates one after another with brutal efficiency. Her focus is absolute. She thinks to herself that one of the two is him, and the other is her, Calua. Watching the display, Phil reflects on her power. He understands that if she can overcome the inherent physical weakness of a mage, she can succeed in this mansion. He marvels at how such a slender girl can possess such strength, her name echoing in his thoughts. This is the power to stand beside her desired partner at any time, under any circumstances. From that singular ideal, 3 great magics were born. Calua streaks across the training ground, a living embodiment of their might. The first of these is the improvement of speed. In this state, speed becomes weight, and weight becomes power, allowing her to compensate for a lack of physical strength with overwhelming force. The third magic is body reinforcement, which grants her the durability to withstand the immense physical strain and air resistance of moving in a world that surpasses the speed of sound. Her display of power left the onlookers stunned. Phil Salmabart remarked that while not flashy, the battlefield she created was undeniably real. Beside him, Miri's Maria could only whisper in awe at how amazing it was. Having concluded the demonstration, Calua Scarlet clapped the dust from her hands. She announced that was enough for the day, noting with some satisfaction that the knights had lasted longer than in previous sessions. The defeated knights could only groan from the ground, forced to acknowledge their own immaturity in the face of her skill. As Calua turned, Phil and Miri's approached, thanking her for her hard work and congratulating her on a job well done. As they walked away from the training grounds, Phil considered that she had been particularly unsparing. He offered her a reward, asking if there was anything she wanted, perhaps some new clothes. He then shifted topics, deciding they should visit Miri's family soon, prompting Calua to agree while noting the abrupt change of subject. The 3 of them continued along a vine-covered walkway when Phil announced that it was about time for him to depart as well. Calua immediately asked where he was going. He paused, leaning back with his hands clasped behind his head, and stated simply that it was time for his periodic report. With that, he sent Calua and Miri's on their way, telling them to go on ahead. The 2 women departed through the lush, rose-filled gardens. His destination was the Scarlet Dukedom. Inside a grand estate, Phil sat across from Alesh Scarlet, the head of the ducal house and Calua's father. Alesh greeted him warmly, asking for an update on his daughter's condition. Over a meal, Phil reported that Calua was doing well, as always, and that her discipline was such that she made the journey to visit once a month. Alesh mused that she seemed quite energetic, then asked why Phil, the renowned shadow hero, would entrust his daughter to him, questioning if it was because she would be a nuisance otherwise. The question sent Alesh into a fit of laughter. He apologized, though Phil remained stone-faced. The Duke recalled how his daughter had suddenly announced her desire to serve the shadow hero, a declaration that had left both him and his wife utterly speechless with shock. At the entrance to the Scarlet Estate, Duke Alesh scarlet pants with relief. He explains that he was shocked to learn his daughter, Kalua, had been forcibly taken to her family home after being tricked by a masked woman. He had suspected something was amiss when the shadow hero returned, and his fears were confirmed. The Duke clarifies that while it wasn't a proper abduction, he wasn't thinking clearly at the time. He recalls a noble at a party who was fond of Kalua and later discovered that this noble's family employed a back alley guild. This connection, he explains, led to a major incident. In the shadows of an alley, the shadow hero thanks the saint, Merciless, admitting he wouldn't have known what to do if she hadn't found him. Later, in his civilian guise as Phil Salmabart, he tells the Duke it's a good thing the guild and the noble were caught, adding that the Duke should be more proud of his own inconspicuous power. He agrees, laughing, that Phil does his job well. The Duke notes that while the mischievous girl from his household was exposed, his own daughter was raised well and grew up quickly. Phil quietly concurs, a thoughtful expression on his face. Over a meal, the Duke states his wish for Phil to marry Kalua soon. He confesses to feeling like a useless father for the past 2 years while Phil has been by her side. He then shifts the topic, asking about Phil's current reputation as the shadow hero. He dismisses his own question, however, saying that what's more important is his daughter's happiness. With a warm smile, he declares that as long as she is happy, that is all that matters. Phil listens intently, reflecting internally that he cannot make such a promise yet. He doesn't know where Kalua's feelings truly lie and feels he might be disqualified as a noble for it. His resolve hardens. He looks directly at the Duke and vows that he will absolutely make Kalua happy, ensuring she will never regret coming to him. He asks the Duke to entrust his daughter to his care. Visibly moved, the Duke simply responds, "Is that so?" 1 week later, the magnificent Lyrak castle stands tall, its grounds bustling with carriages and guests. Inside, a grand ball is in full swing. Amidst the glittering chandeliers and checkered floor, Princess Nicola, dressed in an elegant black gown, looks out at the vast crowd with wide eyes, exclaiming at the sheer number of people. She watches in surprise as Miri's Maria, the saint, makes a stunning entrance. In a departure from her usual pure white, Miri's wears an elaborate black gown, with decorations that shimmer like stars against the night sky. The striking little devil coordination is so unexpected that it leaves Princess Nicola momentarily speechless. Following the saint's dramatic arrival, Kalua Scarlet appears, providing a radiant contrast. She is dressed in a pure white gown, a choice made to perfectly complement her reddish hair, creating an image of breathtaking beauty that captivates the entire hall. Watching from the crowd, Phil is mesmerized, thinking her loveliness is almost criminal. As the guests murmur in admiration, a young nobleman approaches Phil, expressing his relief that the saint made it to the castle safely after the attack on her a month ago. He comments that while no fool would dare cause trouble in the royal palace, it's impossible to be too careful. Phil listens quietly, a thoughtful expression on his face. His contemplation is shattered when an older nobleman points directly at him, his voice booming across the room. "You are the shadow hero." The declaration sends a shockwave through the crowd. Immediately, other nobles surge forward, eagerly shouting marriage proposals on behalf of their daughters, creating a chaotic scene. Overwhelmed by the sudden, intense attention, Phil grimaces. "Am I some new product?" he mutters under his breath, feeling like a small animal being swarmed and paraded around for the noble's benefit. Seeing the dangerous crush of people, the saint's attendants quickly move to escort her away from the commotion to speak with church officials. Phil gives a quick nod of approval, telling them to get her to safety while he and Kalua are left to face the throng. As the crowd presses in, Kalua turns to Phil, her expression serious. She questions him about the rumors of Duke Scarlet giving his blessing to their marriage before they had even discussed it properly, pointing out the impropriety of the situation given her current status as a maid. Flustered, Phil asks if they can discuss it later. He leans closer, whispering urgently, "For now, is there a good way to silence this shadow hero business?" He suggests they just try to weather the storm for the moment and figure out a way to escape the hall. Kalua looks at him intently and replies that she has an idea. Upon hearing her plan, Phil's face lights up with renewed confidence. "Of course, you're my partner," he exclaims, clenching his fists in determination. "I'm counting on you." Nearby, Miri's observes them, noting to herself that her master seems to be holding back on any talk of engagement. Just as they finalize their strategy, a clear, authoritative voice cuts through the din of the ballroom. Princess Nicola steps forward, capturing the attention of every guest as she makes a stunning declaration. "My engagement is proceeding." Amidst the stunned silence following the princess's declaration, Phil Selmabart's gaze shifted upwards. A slight, knowing smile played on his lips as he rested his chin on his clasped hands. He called out, his voice cutting through the tension. "Oh, excuse me, Kalua-san." In a grand, crowded hall, Kalua Scarlet silences the assembled nobility with a single, stunning declaration. Her engagement is proceeding as planned. The announcement hangs in the air, met with stunned silence from the guests, including an imposing man with an eye patch. The declaration immediately throws the room into chaos. Nobles shout in disbelief, protesting that they had heard nothing of such an arrangement. As one man sees an opportunity, Kalua is quickly pulled away from the growing commotion. Her companion, the young nobleman with reddish-brown hair, looks back at her with wide-eyed confusion. She meets his gaze with unwavering resolve, explaining that everything now depends on Phil. Meanwhile, seated away from the chaos, Phil Selmabart quietly accepts a glass of grape juice, seemingly unaware of the drama his name has been drawn into. He is approached by Princess Nicola, who thanks him for setting aside their own engagement and cautions him not to get drunk. He muses on the irony that the false authority of the shadow hero was never used to help the Duke's daughter. His thoughts are interrupted as Kalua rushes up, calling his name with urgency. Princess Nicola, now in a striking black dress, confirms to him that her business with the church is finished. She remarks that while she and Miri's are different, they share a trait, an inability to deny someone whose convictions are strong and trustworthy. But this conversation is cut short. A deep voice calls out his name. The imposing man with the eye patch from earlier now stands before him, suggesting that in light of the recent attack, Phil should be more on his guard. His words strike Phil like a physical blow. The young man's head drops, sweat beading on his skin as he stammers, unable to respond. In a sudden burst of panicked energy, he leaps clean over the man, shouting for him to disperse. The man stares in shock as Phil flees, demanding to know what he's doing. The man, identified as Roy Selmabart, head of the household, glares with fury. He questions why his own son would run from him. A painful memory surfaces, a younger Roy towering over a terrified child, callously remarking that his son's head is merely a tool for measuring power, as a woman who appears to be Phil's mother apologizes meekly. Elsewhere in the hall, a woman of refined grace, Countess Maria Selmabart, greets Kalua Scarlet. A young girl accompanying Kalua gasps in recognition, identifying the Countess as Phil's mother. The girl is utterly starstruck, stammering that her mind has gone as blank as a shining star in the Countess's presence. Meanwhile, Roy Selmabart turns his attention to his other son, Zahn. He questions him about the rumors he's heard regarding Kalua's engagement, remarking with a sneer that she seems like the type to be easily deceived and manipulated. His voice sharpens with rage as he demands Zahn repeat what he said. In response, Zahn throws himself to the floor in a deep, trembling bow, offering a sincere apology as the sound of shattering glass echoes nearby. Across the room, the commotion has not gone unnoticed. The young girl with Kalua begins to cry, distressed that Phil's head has been made into the shape of a flower. As Kalua comforts the child, Countess Maria sighs with weary resignation, apologizing for the constant trouble her son causes. At a formal gathering, a young blonde noblewoman in a dark dress nervously approaches a woman with long, dark hair. She introduces herself as Miri's Era Maria. The woman, Maria, smiles warmly, mentioning she's heard about her from Kalua. The blonde girl's gaze shifts to a younger girl with reddish-brown hair, confirming her identity. Maria continues, explaining that she receives regular reports on the situation and that the saint is currently staying at their residence. In the background, her husband, Roy, playfully interacts with their young, spiky-haired son, Zahn. She then cheerfully reveals that she also knows her other son, Phil, has been acting as the shadow hero. The statement stuns the others. The young Kalua protests that it was a secret, while the girl calling herself Miri's begs Maria to stop teasing them. Phil, standing nearby, is shocked that his mother knew all along. He turns to his father, demanding to know why he was kept in the dark about such a significant matter. Roy looks down at his son and reveals the truth. He is the captain of the Royal Knights. His father continues sternly, stating that once Phil's identity is officially known, he will be formally invited to join the Knights' ranks. Roy's voice rises, declaring that a mage is a precious military asset that must fight for the good of the country. He dismisses any concerns about their territory, telling Phil to simply delegate such matters. Nearby, a young Zahn holds up a frilly dress and shouts that he told him so. Interrupting the argument, Maria pulls Phil into a tight embrace, telling him he's a kind boy and that she was overjoyed to hear he was helping people. She then firmly tells her husband that Phil is to inherit the house and is absolutely forbidden from joining the Knights. She instructs Roy to prepare to leave and to lecture Zahn. Her tone softens as she asks the saint to pray for Phil's well-being. She then turns to Kalua, telling the girl she is like a daughter to her and inviting her for tea again soon. Resigned, Roy agrees, though he mutters that Zahn will likely bungle things. He then calls out to Phil. Roy looks at Maria, confessing that while he was tempted to follow her wishes, he couldn't. He expresses his immense pride in having raised such a fine son. Maria smiles, content with his words. From a short distance, Phil watches his parents exchange with a quiet, thoughtful expression. He is overcome with emotion, thinking to himself that he could never bring himself to say such things. A profound sense of pride in his parents washes over him. He sat at a table during a grand ball, where a young noblewoman beside him remarked on the strange atmosphere, a mix of guilt and excitement. Another young lady, Kalua, agreed, noting they were a fine group. Across the crowded ballroom, his parents, Roy and Maria, shared a dance. As they moved gracefully, Roy glanced down at a ring in his hand, quietly affirming his thoughts. The attention of the guests was then drawn to the host, Crown Prince Quirce of the Lyrak Kingdom. He stood before the assembly, thanking them for celebrating his birthday and encouraging everyone to enjoy the festivities. After his speech, the Crown Prince approached the young trio. Phil, along with Kalua Scarlet and Princess Nicola, knelt to offer their congratulations. The prince thanked Phil Salmabard and expressed his pleasure that Lady Kalua could also attend, leaving a flustered Phil to stammer in response. Princess Nicola then smiled warmly, telling Phil she was very happy to see him again. He returned the smile, replying that he felt the same way. Later, while observing the royal siblings seated on their thrones, Kalua leaned toward Phil. She asked if he'd noticed the other princess was absent, explaining that with the war in the south, the first princess was likely being kept away on the front lines. He absorbed this information with a sense of dread. It meant his father was present only as the crown prince's guard, when he could have simply prayed for victory from afar instead of attending the party. From her throne, Princess Nicola commented to her brother that holding such a party was a necessary measure to reassure the citizens. Kalua continued to watch them intently. Her expression hardened as she turned back to Phil, angrily demanding to know why he hadn't heard about the situation. She declared that the war had just begun and that if he had mentioned going to the battlefield, she would have stopped him. Suddenly, the crown prince's voice cut in, addressing Phil directly. He asked what Phil had heard about the shadow hero. Phil froze, a knot forming in his stomach. The prince noted that while there was no proof, he wondered if there was a spark of truth to the rumors, smiling as he added that where there's smoke, there's fire. Phil could only manage a strained agreement. He stammers, a nervous sweat beading on his brow as he offers a bizarre explanation. He claims to be a fan of the shadow hero, so much so that he has been collecting his clothing. His strange answer seems to satisfy the royals for the moment. Bowing deeply, Phil thanks the crown prince, who dismisses him to enjoy the party. As the young noble departs, Prince Kuan remarks to his sister, Princess Nicola, that Phil didn't overstep his bounds, just as she had predicted. The princess, however, cautions her brother to be more careful in the future. Stepping away from the royal presence, Phil is met by Kalua Scarlet. She suggests they can speak more leisurely later, observing that Princess Nicola appears to have successfully evaded those trying to corner her. A dark, triumphant grin spreads across Phil's face as he realizes his greatest worry has vanished in a moment. With that, he thinks his body is now his own to command. His newfound sense of freedom echoes within the grand halls of the royal estate, the stage for the day's intricate social maneuvers. In a quiet moment away from the festivities, Phil Salmabart leaned against a balcony railing, sighing with exhaustion. His fatigue stemmed from the bustling social gathering below. He was supposed to be participating in a matchmaking party, but his family and Mearies had gone off with people from the church, leaving him to reflect on how his freedom was slowly eroding. A sudden sound snapped him from his thoughts. The sound was the cheerful voice of Princess Nicola, who had found him on the balcony. Waving brightly, she called out that she was here. Phil stared in shock, a memory of her encounter with his masked alter ego flashing through his mind. Before he could respond, a furious shout echoed from the party below. It was the crown prince, Kuan, yelling in a rage. Princess Nicola looked down, a flicker of surprise on her face. Ignoring the prince's outburst, Phil's composure shattered. He grabbed the princess, his voice trembling as he demanded to know why she was scolding him and why she hadn't denied the rumors that he was the shadow hero. She remained unfazed by his desperate grip, calmly explaining that she had her reasons. If she had denied the rumors, she explained, he would have been given even more information. She admitted she thought Shadow Hero was a strange alias, but she had found it convincing. Having offered her explanation, she bowed her head deeply in a formal, sincere apology. Her apology made him realize he had been unreasonable. He let go of her, admitting it was his fault and apologizing in turn. A question then occurred to him. He had been saved by her, but had repaid the favor, so how did she know his name? She straightened up, a confident, knowing smile spreading across her face. She declared that, despite appearances, she possessed an excellent memory and never forgot a voice she had heard even once. She elaborated, explaining that while she had her suspicions, hearing him speak just now confirmed everything. Phil stared, dumbfounded, realizing he had made a mistake in underestimating his conversational partner. He stands on a balcony overlooking the city when Miri's Maria approaches with a gentle smile. She asks if he is all right, noting that it's unusual to see him at a gathering of fellow nobles. In the background, other guests murmur amongst themselves, one remarking that he should have said something to them. Her attention then shifts to a small cross pendant he wears. As he confirms it's his, she explains that her entire family are devout followers of the faith. She wonders aloud if it's strange for an entire family to be so devoted to the church, especially given their status as a grand duchy. She quickly clarifies that she isn't an overly zealous believer herself, but feels it's wrong to speak ill of them, before apologizing for her ramble. His expression turns serious as he considers her words, contemplating the reality of the church's internal factional disputes. Seeing his change in demeanor, Miri's grows flustered, lamenting how the conversation has cast a pall over the party. He then asks her directly about the Judgment faction, acknowledging his awareness that the church is currently divided into two opposing groups. She confirms this, identifying the two groups as the Conservative faction and the Judgment faction. She elaborates on their core differences, The conservative faction, she explains, seeks to maintain the current state of affairs, spreading the goddess's teachings while respecting diverse beliefs. The judgment faction, however, is fundamentally the same, but takes a hardline stance. They're determined to eliminate those they deem evil and unforgivable. In simpler terms, she concludes, the judgment faction acts as executioners in the goddess's name. Phil observes grimly that calling them a cult isn't an exaggeration, given that they have already resorted to violence and killed people. Merciless looks away, unable to deny his assessment. Princess Nicola Lyrac observes that it's easy for followers to flock to simplistic causes, like punishing thieves and criminals. She muses that because it's so easy to understand, the number of believers in what they call justice is only increasing. She turns her gaze to Phil Sailmabard, suggesting he should understand since he has done similar things. He remains silent, his expression unreadable, offering no reply to her assertion. On the grand balcony, Phil asks for her thoughts. Princess Nicola states that she leans toward the conservative faction. Since Phil is also being drawn into that same group, he agrees to go along with it for now. Delighted, the princess expresses her happiness that they will be together and looks forward to their future association. Internally, she reflects on how glad she was to have found him today. She then tells him she wanted to thank him properly if they ever met again, calling him her lifesaver for his actions during the attack. Phil looks at her, slightly taken aback by her direct gratitude. Continuing, the princess clarifies that her actions weren't solely to thank him. It was also partly a whim, a hobby of hers. She wonders aloud if it's strange for a person's hobby to be helping others, questioning if it's any different from a scoundrel's way of amusing themselves. He questions if that's truly the case, warning her that standing beside a scoundrel like him will only tarnish her own reputation. She turns toward him with a gentle smile, assuring him that, at least in her eyes, that isn't true at all. Leaning closer with a radiant expression, she asks, "Don't you look cool, like a hero?" Phil stares back, a faint blush rising on his cheeks as he is caught completely off guard by her compliment. He turns away, flustered, pleading with her to spare him the teasing. In response, Princess Nicola simply lets out a hearty, unrestrained laugh. As he begins to walk away, Phil thanks her for the helpful information. The princess replies that she's glad, then brings up the conservative faction again, specifically mentioning Miri's Maria. She thinks to herself that one only needs to watch the saint to understand. Laughing, Princess Nicola adds that Miri's has a discerning eye and, incidentally, that someone named Kira is part of the judgment faction. Pausing in the doorway, Phil looks back, completely bewildered, wondering who she is talking about. He walked away, leaving Miri's Maria alone on the balcony. She watched him go, a thoughtful expression on her face. It was strange, she mused, having only met Phil once before. Meanwhile, Princess Nicola Lyrac made her way through a stone courtyard, her dark dress a stark contrast to the light paving stones. Their conversation had gone on for quite some time, and she knew she needed to return soon. Her thoughts were interrupted as she spotted a familiar figure ahead. With a sudden burst of energy, she rushed forward, calling out Miri's name. Before she could reach her, however, a cheerful voice cut through the air. A young woman with short, light-colored hair appeared, as if from nowhere, waving enthusiastically. Princess Nicola recognized her at once, exclaiming Kira's name in surprise. Quirce confirmed she was there and asked if the princess had been well. The newcomer, Quirce, wasted no time, pulling the princess into a tight, almost crushing embrace. Nicola, caught off guard, remarked that Quirce was as boisterous as ever, while Miri's looked on with a slightly bewildered expression. After releasing her, Nicola expressed her surprise at seeing Quirce at the party. Leaning in conspiratorially, Quirce admitted that she was there looking for a sponsor. Their conversation then took an unexpected turn. Quirce asked if it was Nicola who had approached Phil. She confessed that she had intended to do so herself, but her expression hardened as she added that even if she had, the shadow hero would have likely refused her. She was taken aback by the claim, asking why Phil would ever refuse. Quirce, however, dismissed her concern with a wave of her hand, stating that there was nothing strange about it. Quirce's playful demeanor vanished in an instant. Her eyes narrowed with a chilling intensity as she leaned close to the princess. She whispered that her faction, the judgment faction, had once tried to attack Miri's. The weight of her words left the princess utterly frozen. A single bead of sweat traced a path down her temple as she stared ahead, completely speechless. In the grand estate's garden, Miri's leans against Quirce, utterly distraught. She stammers, unable to fully process the shocking revelation she has just heard. As Quirce's hand gently touches her chin, Miri's looks up, her eyes wide with confusion. She repeats the words aloud, questioning the idea of an arbiter's instruction. Quirce leans in close, her voice low and serious. She advises Miri's that it would be better for her to stay away, reminding her that she, Quirce, is the saint of the arbiters, and that Miri's knows what that implies. Having delivered her warning, she turns and begins to walk away through the gardens. Miri's, still trying to understand, quietly thanks her and follows a few paces behind. Her expression hardens, her eyes glinting with a chilling intensity. She explains that the arbiters act in the name of justice, and that their great cause requires the elimination of any who would stand in their way. She then poses a question to Miri's. Does that make them good people? Miri's, walking beside her, looks deeply troubled. She remarks that until now, she believed Quirce only targeted villains, but now it seems her activities have expanded. She asked her friend why. He stops. She asks if Merciless thinks it's a misunderstanding, then reveals a horrifying truth. It is the current consensus among the arbiters that if she were to agree, they would kill Merciless right there on the spot. Merciless freezes, her face a mask of pure shock. Just then, Princess Nicola comes running across the courtyard, calling out to them about a task from the Archbishop. Unfazed by the interruption, Merciless turns back to Quirce, her voice trembling as she asks why she joined the arbiters and if she is truly aware of what she is doing. She glances back over her shoulder, a faint, almost sad smile on her face. She simply remarks on how truly kind Merciless is. Her expression then twists into one of cold, absolute conviction. Shadows crawl across her face as she declares that she has no choice. She simply cannot forgive evil people. Merciless is left paralyzed by terror. Meanwhile, at a lavish ball inside a grand castle, Phil Salmabart stands apart from the crowd. His face is a mask of anguish as he clenches his fist, a silent scream of frustration escaping him. His brooding is interrupted by a young noblewoman who chides him for sighing after she did him the favor of dancing with him. Phil looks down, exhausted, as she points out that his mental state is at rock bottom, making him a poor partner for the other young ladies, whom she refers to as kittens. Their conversation is cut short by the arrival of Princess Nicola. She dismisses the young girl, telling the kittens time to go home, before turning her attention to Phil and asking if he is finished with his talk. Her tone softens as she looks at him with concern, quietly asking if he is truly all right. He forces a smile, deflecting her concern by claiming nothing is wrong and remarking that she looks pale instead. His attention is then drawn to the young noblewoman from before, now surrounded by other girls. He chuckles, noting that she was just swarmed by the kittens herself. His gaze then sweeps across the room and lands on Merciless Maria. He calls out to the saint, abruptly asking if she would dance with him. Merciless turns, startled by his sudden and direct request. Before she can answer, the young noblewoman chimes in, questioning if he's just going to dance. She advises him that dancing with the saint will keep the other kittens away, urging him to make a memorable impression. Phil smiles, agreeing with the idea. He turns back to Merciless, suggesting they make the party enjoyable since their conversations have been so dull, and then they can go home. Her initial surprise melts away, replaced by a look of gentle understanding and warmth as a soft smile graces her lips. He reaches out and takes her hand in his own gloved one, a silent agreement passing between them. They move to the center of the floor, beginning a graceful dance amidst the glittering splendor of the grand ballroom, a quiet moment shared between just the two of them under the watchful gaze of the castle at night. Several days after the unrest in the capital was safely quelled, a new chase unfolds on the bustling city streets. A small, white cat with distinctive black markings around its eyes darts through the crowd. From off-panel, a man spots it and shouts for others to pursue. Leading the pursuit is Phil Salmabart, who sprints down an alleyway after the fleeing feline, yelling for it to wait. Close behind him is a young noble girl with reddish-brown hair, keeping pace as best she can. As he bursts out of the alley, the surrounding crowd immediately recognizes him. Surprised murmurs and exclamations ripple through the onlookers, with people pointing and identifying him as both Phil Sama and the Shadow Hero. The cat ignores the commotion and disappears into another narrow alley. Someone in the crowd shouts that the fan's nuisance is getting away, and Phil, without hesitation, follows it into the passage. He and the young girl come to a stop, finding the alley empty. Peeking into a large wooden barrel, Phil mutters in frustration that he's lost it. The girl observes that it couldn't have possibly turned down the same path they took. From a nearby doorway, a figure emerges. It is the maid, Kalua's Scarlet, holding the squirming cat firmly by the scruff of its neck. With a stern gaze, she asks, "Well, did you catch it?" As another maid peeks out from behind her. Later, inside, Phil explains the situation. He admits his surprise when Kalua suddenly appeared and told him to search for a cat. He presents a childlike drawing of the animal, clarifying that he'd received a report about a child crying over their lost pet and decided to help. He recalls the friendly nobleman who gave him the tip, remembering his own thoughts on the matter. Getting out into a lively place would be a good change of pace and might even lift his spirits. Hearing his selfless reasoning, the young noble girl looks up at him, her eyes filled with admiration as she softly speaks his name. Kalua, however, remains pragmatic. She suggests that since the cat has been returned to its owner, they should simply cancel the mission. But Phil counters with a determined thumbs up, declaring that he has received no such report and that the mission will continue. The young noble girl, her eyes wide with determination, interrupts the conversation. She declares that they must stop this discussion, insisting that she will absolutely be the one to search for the cat. He turns to Kalua, gesturing toward the girl. He clarifies that it is she who is so insistent, and asks Kalua directly if she is opposed to searching for the cat. She bristles, her face flushing as she loudly proclaims that she is simply terrible with cats. Phil seems to accept this explanation. Kalua adds that she is a tool for Merciless, and that Merciless herself can be quite stubborn. Unfazed, the little girl declares she won't give up, reasoning that if she tries hard, she'll be rewarded with a hamburger steak for dinner, a logic that leaves Phil momentarily speechless. The girl then looks up at him with wide, innocent eyes and asks a simple question. Why can't they just use magic? He explains the grim reality. If Kalua were to use her magic in the city, people would die. Her high-speed abilities would inadvertently kill anyone nearby. He continues, adding that he also wishes to avoid leaving any traces of magic that could expose his identity as the shadow hero. Since this is a request from Merciless, he must handle it with discretion. The young girl listens and seems to understand, accepting the situation. With the matter settled, she points down an alleyway, announcing her intent to search there immediately and suggesting they retrace their steps. As she runs ahead, he asks Kaluuya about her familiarity with the city, noting that Merciless has likely given her some guidance. He decides it's best to let Kaluuya act independently, trusting her experience. Kaluuya, however, is lost in thought, finding it strange that a cat would flee so desperately if its goal was to be caught. She laments that she can't even touch it because she's too scared, admitting it's the sole weakness of an otherwise perfect superhuman. He suggests they split up, worried that the cat might wander into a dangerous area if they don't find it soon. Before they can act, the ground beneath them erupts as a massive, shadowy hand with razor-sharp claws bursts forth. The shadowy force violently launches Phil, Kaluuya, and the young girl into the sky, sending them plummeting from the rooftop. Far below, on an adjacent roof, a dark, cloaked figure stands, its shadowy arms still raised from the attack. Instead of plummeting to the streets below, the trio finds themselves safely on another rooftop. Phil, holding both Kaluuya and the young noble girl in his arms, declares their arrival with a proud grin. Kaluuya, however, is not impressed, demanding to know what he was thinking by acting so suddenly. The noble girl, flustered by the close contact, stammers an apology, finding the situation quite overwhelming. In the bustling city streets, Phil's Sailmabart runs through a dense crowd with Miri's Maria and a small white cat. Miri's asks why they've come up onto a building, and he explains that just by walking through the streets, he saw a grand procession forming. He raises his hand, declaring that from now on, they will observe from above. Miri's agrees enthusiastically, but Kaluuya Scarlet, with a sigh, tells him to start over from the beginning. Following his plan, the group settles onto a rooftop overlooking the city. Phil explains they will keep a low posture, only peeking their heads out to avoid being reported as stalkers. Kaluuya, however, glares at his leering expression, thinking that his face is the real problem. From their perch, Miri's expresses her relief that they won't have to worry about being approached by people. Phil agrees, admitting he wouldn't know what to say. Lying beside them, Kaluuya silently thinks that she's glad he understands her concerns. Miri's then asks to see the search document one more time. Phil shows it to her, pointing out the target, a white cat with black markings around its eyes. Kaluuya looks on with a grimace, muttering how dreadful the situation is. As they lie on a rooftop, Kaluuya remarks that Phil must have a gentle side to be so fond of cats. He retorts that it's different from his affection at the cat mansion. She teases him for saying such a thing in front of Miri's, who then asks what they are talking about. Miri's turns to Phil, acknowledging that his popularity must have made navigating the crowded streets difficult. She adds that since she's also on patrol, she is grateful for his consideration. Their conversation halts as they all realize something is amiss. Phil notes that the cat they were observing is gone. Miri's wonders where it could have gone, and Kaluuya confirms she can't find it either. Suddenly, the white cat leaps onto Phil's back, causing him, Kaluuya, and Miri's to cry out in shock. As a commotion unfolds, Miri's has a fleeting thought about Phil trying to save a tragic heroine despite being a low-level character, wondering what he's doing in a place like this. A flustered Phil realizes the cat must have been on the roof the whole time, thinking it was trying to trick them and calling it a lighthouse demon claw. Miri's corrects him, identifying it as a joke. Kaluuya quickly warns them not to let it run away, or all their hard work will be for nothing. Kaluuya warns that if they get too close, the cat will fly away and become a twinkling star. Taking this literally, Miri's eyes widen with determination as she declares that she will be the one to go. Her sudden lunge ends in disaster as she trips and falls flat on her face, startling the cat into leaping away. Watching the scene unfold, Phil sighs at the pair of Ditsas, realizing he has no choice but to handle it himself. As he resolves to act, dark, shadowy tendrils erupt from his body. He leaps forward, his power forming grasping hands to ensnare the fleeing animal, much to the cat's own shock. His shadowy appendages stretch across the rooftops in hot pursuit. The cat darts and weaves between the grasping claws, prompting a frustrated shout from Phil. Despite its agility, the cat cannot escape. A shadow tendril finally catches the creature, wrapping around its torso as Phil proclaims it won't get away. With the chase concluded, he crouches on the rooftop, holding the captured and slightly disgruntled cat by the scruff of its neck as his shadow power recedes. He returns to the others, presenting the prize. Miri's is ecstatic, cheering that they've done it. She praises Phil, saying she knew a mage who could escape a 1,000-year-old cat bath must be amazing. Kaluuya adds that the cat is quite the troublemaker. Her joy overflows into tears of relief. Wiping her eye, Miri's remarks that she never gets bored when she is with Phil and the others, wishing that days like this could continue forever. She turns to him, her expression more serious. She observes that even though he just caught the cat, he doesn't seem happy. She then asks if he would be willing to listen to her troubles. Before he can respond, the cat nuzzles affectionately against her cheek. Miri's smiles softly, remarking that Phil is completely transparent and easy to read. Miri's Maria, holding her pet cat, explains to Phil's Sailmabart that she has come to his home to say her farewells. She clarifies that while the Archbishop had given her a role at the party, She must now head south for church business. Phil looks on, surprised by the news, as his maid, Calua Scarlet, holds the disgruntled-looking feline. Calua leans in close to Phil, teasingly remarking that he seemed quite lonely during the saint's visit. Flustered, he sharply tells her to be quiet, retorting that she was the one who seemed that way. Ignoring their bickering, Miri's gazes down at her cat with a sad smile. She quietly admits to herself that even though her stay was only temporary, saying goodbye is still a lonely affair. She had thought the sorrow of their parting would leave her feeling dejected, yet her expression remains placid. From a distance, Phil observes her, wondering if there is more to her calm demeanor than meets the eye. He questions her true feelings. Is she afraid to leave the place where she was once attacked, or is it something else entirely? He quickly dismisses the thought, concluding that it is not his place to intrude upon Miri's personal affairs. As he stands lost in thought, Miri's turns to him directly. She tells him that she was very happy he invited her to dance at the party, catching him completely by surprise. She elaborates, explaining that the memory of their dance will support her and give her strength, no matter what happens next. A vision of them dancing fills the air, her in a magnificent dark gown. In the present, Phil asks if her beautiful sepia-toned hair was dyed to its current golden color, while Calua watches them from the side with a look of mild irritation. He smiles gently at Miri's. He confesses that while he dislikes the idea of his life being intertwined with another's, he is glad that his memory will become a source of support for her. Hearing his heartfelt words, Miri's is visibly moved. Her eyes well up with tears as she clutches her cat, whispering that he truly sees and understands everything about her. With tears of joy streaming down her face, she thanks him for everything. She beams, holding her cat aloft, and exclaims that she is so very glad to have met him before turning to depart. In the days following Miri's departure, a quiet calm settled over the Selmabard estate. Phil and his maid, Calua Scarlet, shared a moment of peaceful contentment. This tranquility was shattered by a commotion from the street. A man in the crowd pointed upwards, his voice ringing with excitement. He shouted that it couldn't be magic, that it must be the shadow hero himself, exclaiming that if Phil Sama was in this town, then he must be the legendary figure. His cries drew a massive crowd, all craning their necks to see. They erupted in cheers for their hero, some even calling for him to observe them. High above on the rooftop, the source of the excitement was revealed: Phil's pet cat, who had apparently been mistaken for the hero. A voice from the estate called out for the cat to come down. A week later, life began to settle. From his window, Phil watched the carriage carrying Miri's finally depart from the estate. With her gone, he attempted to resume his former, peaceful routine. He was soon interrupted by Calua, who asked what was troubling him. With a look of sheer exhaustion, Phil lamented that his fan base had only grown larger since he was forced to use magic in town, gesturing to the fervent crowd gathered outside. She added that his brother, Zahn, was not being lectured, but was supposedly reflecting on his past actions, a change that was only creating more work for her. Overwhelmed by it all, Phil slumped onto the table, groaning for it to stop. Calua then informed him that she had a message from his father. She presented a document, and Phil, still weary, took it with a questioning look. He began to read, and Calua explained that his father had been curious as to why he was so preoccupied with his own affairs that he had overlooked this important matter. The document detailed the current state and history of the South-North War, a realization that slowly dawned on Phil. The document triggered a memory. He recalled his father, Roy, explaining the conflict to him as a child. Roy had insisted on being taught about it, pointing to a map and noting that the battlefield was near the southern border, a small village, easily destroyed. He had looked at his son and stated that he could not consider such a matter to be someone else's problem. Calua Scarlet explains to a pensive Phil Selmabard that she had tried to dissuade his father from leaving. However, he gave her a condition for Phil to not go and told her to rest easy. Phil reflects grimly on the wars raging in both the south and the north. A map reveals the geopolitical landscape at the heart of the conflict. The Selmabard domain is situated near the border between the Lyrak Kingdom to the north and the lands of the Alkaz minority to the south. The conflict began when radical elements among the Alkaz, people living near the border, started a commotion, raising fears that they would cross into Lyrak territory. In response, the southern Alkaz nation claimed its people were being harmed and, under the grand pretext of rescuing them, launched an invasion of the north. The decision was met with heated debate among the kingdom's council. Back in the present, Calua voices her suspicions to Phil, finding it unnatural that the minority group would start the trouble. She muses that the southern nation's justification for war seems flimsy and contrived. She continues, mentioning that even the first princess is said to be commanding the battle alongside His Majesty, indicating the full scale of the mobilization. Phil processes this, acknowledging that while claiming justice is a common tactic, the current situation feels different, suggesting there's no need for them to act rashly. His thoughts are shattered as his mother, Maria, bursts into the room in a panic, crying his name and exclaiming that something terrible has happened. She tearfully informs Phil that his father, Roy, has gone to the war. Phil is stunned into silence. Maria explains that while it's natural for a knight to join a war, she doesn't want Phil to go, begging him to wait. Later, Calua explains the strategic oddity of the situation to Phil over the map. His father was supposed to be guarding the crown prince. She questions why he would be pulled from such a critical duty, especially when the war is supposedly going well, unless the situation has changed. She concludes that the most logical place to conscript new forces would be from their own nearby territory. He stares intently at the map, his eyes narrowing as a realization dawns. He notes aloud that there are only 2 villages in the south. His eyes widened in sudden, chilling realization. He turned to Kalua, demanding to know how she was aware of the situation. From his family's territory, there were only 2 small villages to the south, a fact he was certain no one else should know. This remote region was indeed home to nothing more than 2 quiet villages nestled before a tranquil mountain range. It was understood that no one from the Salmabar household ever had reason to venture south. Meanwhile, far from the Salmabar estate, the saint, Miri's Maria, smiled brightly while holding her cat. She announced that she had received a great duty from the archbishop and was preparing to head south. Back in the study, Phil confronted his mother, his voice tight with urgency as Kalua stood by. He demanded to know why Lady Miri's had gone south. She looked away, troubled. Maria explained that it was indeed strange for the saint to go south on a pilgrimage, as they normally tour the major cities to rally the faithful. She then recalled her husband mentioning he was being sent to participate in the Northern War, a statement that now seemed contradictory and concerning. Suddenly, his brother Zahn burst in, his face a mask of fury. "Damn it, this is I thought," he roared. He declared that their father had ignored his duty to protect the royal family and joined the war for a reason that had existed since Zahn himself was born. Phil and his mother stared, stunned by the outburst. She brought a hand to her mouth, a gasp escaping her lips. Maria realized with horror that there must be people in this country considered more important than the royal family itself. Beside her, Kalua's expression hardened with concern. The maid knelt before Phil, her voice filled with worry. She pointed out that Lady Miri's was heading into the South-North War. Even if she went as a healer, she would be placed in the rear echelons and could easily get caught up in the conflict. Zahn's voice cut through the air, sharp and mocking. "That's where you're wrong," he sneered. "The premise is flawed. There's no precedent for a saint ever participating in a war." He continued, explaining to the stunned group that a saint is strictly a rear support cleric, a symbol for the faithful. No matter the circumstances, a saint must never go to a battlefield. Kalua could only stare, speechless, trying to comprehend the terrifying implication of his words. As she listened, Zahn's expression grew dark with grim certainty. He explained the harsh reality of the situation. On a battlefield, it would not be strange for anyone to die. He continued, spelling out the horrifying implication against a serene image of the saint. In such a chaotic place, no matter who was killed or by whom, the matter would simply be dismissed as an unavoidable casualty of war. The thought crystallized into a horrifying vision. The saint assassinated under the cover of war. Snapping back to the present, Kalua insisted this was no time for talk. With his mind made up, Phil declared their new course of action. They were going to Lady Miri's.